The Middle East has long been a geopolitical cauldron with intricate alliances and overlapping conflicts. Qatar, a key U.S. ally hosting the Al Udeid military base, also maintains ties with groups Israel deems threats. The U.S. balances interests between Israel and Qatar. In 2025, an unexpected Israeli airstrike on Qatar shook the region, exposing the tangled web of Middle East relations and plunging the world into a new crisis. Below is the account of this confrontation, from a lightning assault to an outcome that stunned the globe. On a moonless night in 2025, Doha's sky blazed as Israeli F-35 jets breached Qatar's air defenses, dropping precision bombs on a military facility in the outskirts, believed to be a secret weapons depot supplying anti-Israel groups. Explosions rocked the capital, flames soaring, shattering skyscraper windows. Alarms wailed, civilians fleeing in panic through the dark. Qatar's radar failed to react, and the base was leveled in minutes. The U.S., with its nearby Al Udeid base, was thrust into a dilemma as ally Israel attacked ally Qatar. The Gulf turned into a geopolitical powder keg, poised to erupt with devastating force. Qatar responded instantly, launching surface-to-air missiles from remaining bases, downing 2 Israeli jets in a brutal dogfight over the Persian Gulf. U.S. F-15s from Al Udeid scrambled to de-escalate, but a Qatari missile accidentally struck a U.S. jet, igniting tensions among allies. Israel deployed more aircraft, targeting Qatar's missile launchers, turning Doha's sky into a lattice of fire and smoke. Qatari warships surged into the Gulf, firing cannons at Israeli planes, while U.S. destroyers attempted to enforce a no-fly zone. Relentless explosions shook the waters, transforming the Persian Gulf into a chaotic battlefield where every decision risked catastrophe. The conflict surged into space and cyberspace with terrifying speed. Qatar, backed by regional allies, used satellite technology to jam Israeli aircraft controls. Israel retaliated by destroying a Qatari communications satellite with anti-satellite weapons, disrupting regional military networks. Israeli hackers infiltrated Qatar's financial systems, freezing billions in assets, while Qatar countered by attacking Israel's power grid, plunging Tel Aviv into darkness. In the skies, combat drones from both sides clashed, exploding in fireballs that lit up the night. The U.S. attempted mediation, but cyber attacks scrambled communications, thrusting the region into an uncontrolled storm of digital and firepower chaos. The conflict spiraled as Qatar's allies, including Turkey and Iran, deployed warships and jets to the Persian Gulf, threatening Israeli bases. The U.S., caught between allies, sent a fleet from Bahrain, using laser defenses to intercept Iranian missiles. Israel launched ballistic missiles at targets in Qatar and Iran, shaking coastal cities. Other Middle East nations were drawn to the brink, with Saudi Arabia and the UAE weighing involvement. The global economy reeled as oil prices soared, Persian Gulf shipping routes blockaded. Satellite imagery showed massive fires and black smoke clouds, marking an unprecedented phase of warfare in the Middle East. The attack's fallout shattered global alliances. The U.S., torn between Israel and Qatar, faced pressure from NATO and the UN for a ceasefire, but talks collapsed as Qatar-backed militias attacked Israel. Other Middle East nations held emergency summits, deploying relief teams to ravaged areas. Autonomous robots cleared chemically contaminated zones from the strikes, while international special forces hunted insurgent groups. Israel and Qatar, facing economic and military losses, were forced into a U.S.-brokered ceasefire, but Middle East alliances fractured, with new militias rising from the chaos. The crisis temporarily curbed the war, but fractured alliances and persistent threats signaled an unstable future. Tensions between the U.S. and China in the South China Sea have persisted through years of maritime and aerial confrontations. U.S. freedom of navigation operations often spark disputes, while China counters with aggressive tactics like deploying fighter jets and naval vessels in close proximity. An intercept of a U.S. warship by a heavily armed Chinese fighter jet in 2025 pushed the region to the brink, triggering a chain of events that shook the global order. Below is the account of this conflict, from an aerial intercept to its far-reaching global consequences. On an August morning in 2025,
Over the South China Sea near Scarborough Shoal, a Chinese J-20 fighter jet loaded with anti-ship missiles closed in on the USS Dewey, an Arleigh Burke-class U.S. destroyer equipped with advanced radar and guided missiles. The Dewey was conducting a freedom of navigation operation to assert international rights in the disputed region. The J-20 broadcast warnings demanding the U.S. ship depart, echoing Beijing's sovereignty claims. But the USS Dewey held its course, radar locked on target, the atmosphere charged. Suddenly, the J-20 swooped low, mere hundreds of meters from the ship, rattling its deck. The waters around Scarborough Shoal became a powder keg, ready to ignite.
The intercept turned aggressive as the J-20 dropped flares near the USS Dewey, disrupting the ship's radar systems. A miscalculation led to a dangerous act. The J-20 fired a warning missile that skimmed past the ship, triggering a small explosion on the water's surface. Alarms blared on the Dewey, smoke rising from the waves. The U.S. ship activated its close-in defense systems, shooting down an anti-ship drone launched by China in response. Nearby Chinese naval vessels moved to encircle the Dewey, while the U.S. deployed F-35 jets from a carrier in the South China Sea. Missiles streaked across the sky, transforming the Scarborough Shoal area into a blazing battlefield, with black smoke and explosions spreading wide.
The conflict spilled into cyberspace and outer space. Viruses targeted the USS Dewey's control systems, disrupting communication with the U.S. fleet. The U.S. countered by crippling radar at Chinese bases on artificial islands in the South China Sea. In space, Chinese and U.S. military satellites clashed in digital attacks, disrupting global positioning systems. Fighter jets from both sides battled over the South China Sea, with hypersonic missiles slicing through clouds. The Dewey's Aegis defense system intercepted most Chinese missiles, but debris from the explosions rained into the sea. The war expanded as U.S. allies joined with patrol boats, turning Scarborough Shoal into a multinational flashpoint, where sky and sea.
The conflict escalated beyond control when China launched a massive cyber attack, paralyzing financial systems and power grids in major U.S. cities. The U.S. retaliated by destroying Chinese cyber command centers in Shanghai and Guangzhou using advanced AI viruses. These attacks disrupted global supply chains, causing panic in commercial hubs. U.S. naval bases in the Pacific faced Chinese ballistic missile strikes, while the U.S. deployed additional carriers to the South China Sea. The global economy reeled as maritime trade routes stalled, and satellite imagery showed cities plunged into darkness, marking an unprecedented phase of warfare. The aftermath of the cyber attacks triggered a global trade crisis. Disrupted supply chains paralyzed major ports, from Shanghai to Los Angeles, leading to shortages of goods and raw materials. Nations reliant on trade scrambled to negotiate emergency alliances to restore shipping. Autonomous robot teams were deployed to repair cyber infrastructure, while international relief ships delivered essential goods to affected regions. The U.S. and China, recognizing the cost of the conflict, paused military actions to focus on economic recovery. But the battlefield remained littered with wreckage, with cybercriminal groups exploiting the chaos to rise. The crisis temporarily curbed the war, but new tensions and lingering trade threats signaled an unstable future.
Tensions between the U.S. and China in the South China Sea have simmered for years, with naval and air confrontations heating up the region. U.S. freedom of navigation operations often spark disputes, while China reinforces its sovereignty claims with provocative actions. In 2025, a swift U.S. strike on 3 Chinese missile bases shifted the balance, stunning the world. Below is the account of this conflict, from a maritime provocation to an outcome that left everyone reeling. On an August morning in 2025, the waters near Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea boiled with tension. A Chinese destroyer closed in on the USS Higgins, a U.S. warship conducting a freedom of navigation patrol. The Chinese ship broadcast warnings demanding the Higgins depart, echoing Beijing's territorial claims. The U.S. vessel held its course, radar locked on target, the atmosphere electric. Suddenly, the Chinese destroyer fired a warning missile that skimmed past the Higgins, triggering a small explosion on the water's surface. Alarms blared, smoke rose, and Scarborough Shoal became a flashpoint ready to ignite. The provocation sparked a fierce U.S. response. The Higgins activated its defense systems, shooting down an anti-ship drone launched by China. F-35 jets from a nearby U.S. carrier scrambled, clashing with Chinese J-20 fighters in brutal dogfights. Missiles streaked across the sky, a Chinese drone exploding and sending a towering geyser skyward. Chinese naval ships encircled, firing water cannons and flares, but the U.S. deployed submarines, launching torpedoes that rocked the enemy fleet. Smoke and flames spread, turning the waters into a hellish battlefield, with relentless explosions churning the sea. The conflict escalated when China launched ballistic missiles from the mainland. The U.S. retaliated with a lightning campaign. In just 14 minutes, cruise missiles from submarines and stealth aircraft obliterated 3 Chinese missile bases along the coast. Explosions shook the mainland, black smoke blotting out the sky, sparking panic in nearby cities. China's air defenses tried to intercept, but the attack's speed overwhelmed them, debris raining down like a storm. China's allies mobilized forces, but the U.S. had shifted the balance, with satellite imagery showing the bases reduced to rubble. China struck back, targeting U.S. bases in Guam and the Philippines, shaking the Pacific. The U.S. deployed a larger fleet, using laser defense systems to intercept missiles. Ferocious air battles spread, with fighters from both sides falling like leaves. The global economy reeled as South China Sea trade routes stalled, oil tankers trapped in the war zone. Explosions and black smoke choked the region, with aerial imagery revealing coastal cities engulfed in flames, marking a brutal phase of warfare. The strike's fallout forced both sides to confront massive losses. Neighboring nations scrambled to prevent further escalation, with relief ships delivering supplies to affected areas. The U.S. and China paused hostilities for urgent negotiations, but insurgent groups exploited the chaos to rise. The crisis temporarily curbed the war, but new tensions and lingering threats signaled an unstable future. Drone warfare has transformed the Ukraine-Russia conflict, with massive swarms becoming a decisive factor in battles. Ukraine's innovative drone tactics have challenged Russia's defenses, while Russia's industrial production fuels its own aerial assaults. In 2025, a massive Ukrainian drone strike on Moscow sent shockwaves through the region, pushing the war to new heights of intensity. Below is the account of this confrontation, from a sudden aerial onslaught to its unforeseen global repercussions. On a stormy night in 2025, hundreds of Ukrainian drones surged toward Moscow, their engines humming like a swarm of angry bees, targeting key infrastructure in a coordinated blitz. Russian radars blared with alerts as the drones evaded initial defenses, slipping through gaps in the S-400 system. The sky darkened with the mass, and the first strikes hit power grids, igniting explosions that lit up the city like fireworks gone mad. Alarms wailed across Moscow, streets emptying in panic as debris rained down. The Kremlin went on red alert, but the sheer number overwhelmed, turning the capital into a cauldron of chaos ready to boil over. Russia's response was swift and furious. Su-57 jets scrambled from air bases, engaging the drone swarm in a deadly aerial ballet, missiles streaking through the night sky in blazing trails. Ground-based. The battle plunged into cyberspace with lightning speed. Russian hackers launched a massive assault on Ukrainian command networks, disrupting drone controls and causing several to crash prematurely. Ukraine countered by infiltrating Russian power systems, blacking out entire districts and sowing confusion in defense commands. In the skies, AI-guided drones clashed, exploding in mid-air fireballs that illuminated the panic below. Hypersonic missiles from Russian silos targeted Ukrainian bases, but advanced intercepts turned them into streaking comets of failure. The war expanded as NATO allies jammed Russian signals, turning the conflict into a high-stakes digital duel where every second counted in a storm of fire and code. The drone assault ignited ground battles as Russian special forces hunted Ukrainian infiltrators suspected in Moscow.
Streets erupted in firefights, with explosions shattering buildings and civilians fleeing in terror. Ukraine responded with precision strikes on Russian supply lines, turning highways into infernos of twisted metal. Chemical agents deployed by desperate Russian units contaminated neighborhoods, forcing evacuations amid choking smoke. Global economies trembled as oil prices skyrocketed from disrupted routes, and satellite feeds showed Moscow's iconic landmarks shrouded in flames. The capital became a labyrinth of destruction, with every alley a potential trap and the escalating nightmare.
The strike's fallout triggered a global backlash, with international sanctions crippling Russia's economy and sparking internal revolts. Protests turned violent in St. Petersburg, leading to a military coup that ousted key leaders. Ukraine capitalized, launching ground offensives that reclaimed territory amid the chaos. Relief convoys flooded in, but insurgent groups rose from the rubble, turning former allies against each other. The crisis temporarily halted major hostilities, but new factions and lingering threats signaled an unstable future.